What you're about to see was never meant to leave the Ministry of Defense archives. They told you the Automaton invasion was an unprovoked act of socialist aggression. They told you we were fighting for the liberation of Cyberstan. They told you it was a necessary war to protect our freedom. That's the lie. This classified briefing shows the Cyberstan campaign was never about liberation. It was about reclamation. Super Earth isn't saving us from a threat. It's racing to bury its own sins, and it's spending Helldivers like ammunition to do it. If you're still watching, Initiate, your clearance is being upgraded in real time. Just understand, the moment you see what's in these files, you can't go back to the official story of this war. Before we declassify the truth, you have to understand the lie. The Ministry of Truth's version starts a century after the First Galactic War, when an old ghost returns. Not the cyborgs, but their creations, the automatons, a socialist legion of war machines, rising from the galactic west, supposedly coded for nothing but extermination. According to the broadcasts piped into every super destroyer, the assault was totally unprovoked. They say the automatons stole blueprints for the Star of Peace, our planet-killing superweapon, during the chaos of the Penta Black Hole incident. Now, High Command claims, the machines are building their own version on their homeworld, Cyberstan, to wipe Super Earth from the stars. So, Super Earth responds with a massive, galaxy-spanning counteroffensive. An operation to storm Cyberstan and liberate it from the Automaton Legion. They call it Operation Valid Pretext. And that's the first crack. You don't name an operation a valid pretext unless you're worried it isn't. That's not heroism. It reads less like a crusade, and more like someone in a boardroom making sure the paperwork looks clean before the body count starts. Keep that name in mind. Because once you see Cyberstan's real history, valid pretext starts to sound like a confession. So why does Super Earth need a pretext at all? For that, we have to open files that don't exist anymore, officially. Before it was branded the Automaton homeworld, Cyberstan was cyborg space. And before that, buried even deeper in the archives, it was human. A frontier world turned industrial furnace. One prevailing theory in the misfiled reports? The cyborg separatists were originally human miners who turned to cybernetics just to survive the planet's brutal conditions. Super Earth didn't like the optics, so the miners became terrorists. The war that followed was sold as a fight for unity. We were told the First Galactic War ended with the cyborgs defeated and peacefully reintegrated. The comms logs say otherwise. The surviving cyborgs weren't welcomed back. They were contained. For a century, work orders and shipping manifests point to Cyberstan functioning as a labor camp, forced industry under the supervision of Super Earth contractors. Their forges, their tech, their bodies repurposed. Cyberstan wasn't a conquered world. It was a prison wrapped in patriotic slogans. Then, the automatons appear. Officially, they're a new alien threat, but their iconography mirrors old cyborg banners. Their hacked broadcasts talk about chains broken and labor reclaimed. One intercepted message was blunt. You enslaved us in the name of freedom. You tried to erase us in the name of freedom. We endured. We adapted. This doesn't look like a random invasion. It looks like a slave revolt that finally outgrew its shackles. And here's the part the Ministry redacts every time. Internal threat assessments show Super Earth predicted mechanized uprising risk on Cyberstan, decades before the first automaton attack. They saw it coming. They didn't prevent it. They waited until they had a valid pretext to burn the whole problem down. If you want to understand what they plan to do with Cyberstan, you start at MALEVELON Creek. Robot Vietnam. 2 months of trench warfare, staggering Helldiver casualties, and endless propaganda about heroic last stands. The feeds called it our finest hour. Then, almost immediately after our victory, the entire Valdez sector collapsed in hours. The automatons didn't just recover, they surged. More organized, more entrenched, like they knew exactly how we'd respond. On paper, MALEVELON Creek is logged as a tragic but necessary win. The creek wasn't a strategic blunder, it was a live fire experiment. How many Helldivers could they lose before morale cracked? How often could they declare a Pyrrhic victory and still have citizens volunteer their children? They discovered something uncomfortable and useful. With the right slogans, the right footage, and enough medals, they could normalize an almost limitless level of attrition. MALEVELON Creek wasn't the end of a campaign, it was the prototype. The test that proved the public would tolerate what was coming next on Cyberstan. Now we open the file that almost locked my terminal. Operation Valid Pretext begins, and High Command announces a galaxy-wide reinforcement pool of 200 million Helldivers. One shared pool for the entire war effort. If it hits 0, the mission fails. On the broadcasts, it's framed as proof of our unshakable resolve. 200 million patriots ready to die for democracy. But inside the planning documents, the language changes. The number isn't called reinforcements, it's called expenditure ceiling, a budget. Charts project acceptable weekly losses in the millions. There are notes about sustained casualty tolerance and population absorption capacity. The war stops looking like a defense and starts looking like a pressure valve, a way to drain restless populations, test recruitment systems, and keep every citizen just desperate enough to comply. Every Helldiver pulled from that pool is another line item in a controlled burn. Die on Cyberstan, and you don't come back as a hero. You come back as a data point in a spreadsheet proving that the machine can afford to lose more. One particularly disturbing annotation flags an anomaly. Automaton kill rates aligning almost perfectly with High Command's projections. A human analyst added a single question mark in the margin. Who is this quota really for? The log after that is corrupted, or manually edited. Same result. So why Cyberstan? Why risk a 200 million body budget on a frozen rock? If this were just about a stolen superweapon design, there are easier targets. When you correlate the most aggressively redacted files, a pattern emerges. Cyberstan isn't just a factory world, it's where several Black Book weapons programs were buried after the First Galactic War. Early Star of Peace prototypes, experimental armor variants like the FS-38 Eradicator, first tested in Cyberstan's mines, sharing eerie design language with Automaton chassis. Publicly, we say the Automatons stole our technology. Internally, the phrasing shifts. Hostile actors accessing legacy systems in situ. Legacy systems, on Cyberstan. Systems we were supposed to have dismantled a century ago. The Automatons aren't just defending a homeworld, they're digging. Every offensive we launch lines up with their excavation sites. Every unprovoked Automaton counterattack centers on old weapons bunkers and data vaults tagged with Super Earth project codes. Operation Valid Pretext isn't a noble charge to stop a new weapon. It's a desperate attempt to destroy the evidence of the old ones before a liberated slave army can broadcast them to the galaxy. We aren't fighting to save Super Earth. We're dying to protect its reputation. So here's the decrypted summary, Initiate. The Cyberstan invasion wasn't a bolt from the blue. It was the inevitable result of a century of oppression and buried technology. A slave revolt reframed as an existential threat. Operation Valid Pretext is the smokescreen. MALEVELON Creek was the rehearsal. The 200 million reinforcements are a population control mechanism wearing a patriotic mask. Super Earth needs an endless enemy more than it needs victory, because an endless enemy justifies endless control. And your attention, right now, is part of that system. Every broadcast you accept, every sanitized briefing you don't question, helps stabilize the lie. That's why these files stay buried, and why leaking them triggers 3 separate security flags on my console. Listen carefully. If this reaches you, the firewall held longer than it should have. I don't know how many more reports I'll be able to pull before my access is reassigned. If you want more declassified briefings, stay subscribed to this channel and don't rely on ministry channels for your truth. The more initiates we have comparing notes, the harder it becomes to erase what you've seen. That'll be for me. Remember, they need your obedience more than your survival. Act accordingly, Initiate.